Yesterday, we saw Adani Group stocks rally, many of them hitting the upper circuit as well. This came since Monday was a closed day for Indian stock markets, and the Friday deferment of the judgment on the ongoing Adani-Hindenburg saga by the Supreme Court resulted in stocks rallying yesterday, and that momentum seems to be true today as well, with Adani Enterprises in the green. Now, what's really gone on? Can we conclusively say that there is nothing for the Supreme Court to find as misgovernance or misdoing on account of the Hindenburg Research, which the Supreme Court again has said that is no real benchmark to base a judgment on? At the same time, SEBI says that it has completed 22 out of the 24 cases pending with it. Stocks continue to rally. Let's try and make sense of whatever has happened in that hearing of the Supreme Court on November 24th with the Managing Director of InGovern Research joining us live this morning, Mr. Shriram Subramanian. Mr. Subramanian, thank you so much for joining us this morning. To begin with, markets seem to once again be seeing the fact that Supreme Court deferring its judgment is perhaps in some way a sort of green shit to Adani. At least that is the sentiment. The green shoots on Adani stock seems like a green shit. But that does not seem to be the case, Mr. Subramanian, is it?
Yes, I think we have to still wait for the final order by the Supreme Court but obviously stock markets always work on expectation. So the expectation is that this would be I would say, clean chit in that sense of at least from the tone that the petitioners had used data points which were not sort of relevant, etc. The tone of the Supreme Court was very acerbic, and the petitioners were dismissive of the petitioners. So to that extent, I think the markets are expecting that the final order will also be in favor of the Adani Group.
Okay, so Mr. Subramanian, at one point the Supreme Court is saying that we should not consider Hindenburg Research, or for that matter any of the other journalistic publications in the world, to be treated as statements of truth or gospels of truth. And at the same time, the Supreme Court is asking SEBI on what SEBI is doing to tighten the noose around shareholders losing wealth on account of such cases, and such cases being referred to as the Adani-Hindenburg saga. So, is the ball now really back in the court of SEBI? And what are the next steps from here? When do we expect SEBI to finally have some sort of a disclosure?
Yeah, in fact, unfortunately, see, the Adani Group is such a large group that right from January, I have been commenting, and when we put out our first report also, we said the remit and the regulator to look into this is only SEBI. It took political overtones, and there was ruckus in Parliament, and there was issues, and these petitioners put it in Supreme Court. Supreme Court, these are all tamashas, I would think. Supreme Court appointing some committee to look into it, etc. SEBI is a regulator who is mandated to look into security issues. If there is violation of the minimum public shareholding, which is the crux of the whole issue, it is in the court of SEBI. Now, SEBI has said 24 out of 24 points they have investigated, 22. So the remaining 2 investigate, get done with it, and then whatever is the issue, put it out in the public domain and bring this entire 24 issues to a close. Whatever it be, even Adani would want. If they have to pay a fine, they will pay a fine. If they have to do some action, they will do. I mean, it cannot be left in limbo, and it cannot be left to these random petitioners taking it to the court of law where they don't even have a shareholding. I mean, these petitioners. So on what grounds are they petitioning?
But Mr. Subramanian, I want to understand these 2 matters which have been pending with SEBI for the longest time now. In fact, if you remember, in the month of May is when the Supreme Court had given directions to SEBI to conclude its investigations by 14th of August. And then 14th August, followed by September, October, November, we've seen this deferment of SEBI presenting its report to the Supreme Court, or to the public for that matter. Now, these 2 matters which are pending with the SEBI, with the regulator, seem to be matters where SEBI is continuing to be hit by what are referred to as opaque structures, and its jurisdiction outside of the shores of India is preventing it from completing its investigation. So what are the options available with SEBI, number one, and number two, even if it continues to be this way, that it is unable to penetrate those opaque structures? By when should the regulator finally be expected to make a full public disclosure of its findings?
Yeah, I would think that at the end of the day, the regulator should try to make its disclosures as early as possible. I think even if it is able to bring closure to 22 out of the 24, let it put out the findings of the 22 issues or at least bring closure to those 22 issues. And then the remaining two can be taken up later, or at least SEBI can put out that they are unable to get data, and that's where they are unable to come to a conclusive end to those two issues.
Okay.
At least there is certainty and closure to those 22 issues. Then.
Okay. I want to just take you back, Mr. Subramanian, to two statements that have come out over this long period of the ongoing investigations and the deferment of hearing dates, and now, of course, there is a reservation on the judgment as well. But the two specific instances have been that the Supreme Court appointed expert committee did not prima facie find any wrongdoing on account of SEBI. And even the Supreme Court on Friday said that it does not find enough material evidence to find that SEBI has actually not done its job correctly as a regulator. So does this mean that SEBI and whatever investigations before even the Hindenburg Research report came out, and obviously after that as well, has put a complete clean sheet, green tick on account of SEBI? And at the same time, SEBI in its own probe, in its own investigations, has not found any sort of manipulation of stock prices. Is that a fair assessment to make?
No, I would think one is SEBI. All that the Supreme Court and the expert committee are saying is that SEBI is doing its job. There was a perception that SEBI was not doing its job. This committee and Supreme Court has just said that SEBI is doing its job, albeit probably slowly because of data, because of foreign jurisdiction, etc., etc. But after that, has SEBI given a clean sheet to Adani's? No, not yet, right? We don't know what are the findings of those 22, at least, items. What are the findings of the two which are yet to be sort of brought to a closure? So I would still reserve judgment on the Adani Group stocks itself. But all said and done, it should be the remit of SEBI. It should not go to Supreme Court and the like and become a political tamasha, if anything. Because Adani Group, yes, it is politically connected probably. But all said and done, this is a securities matter, and it should have been dealt with from a mature securities matter perspective.
In your own experience, sir, in your professional and personal experience, dealing with the regulator, dealing with bodies that protect shareholder interest, is 1 year an okay time for a regulator to conclusively disclose its findings, or do you think it should take more time before it comes out with a final disclosure?
No, 1 year is a reasonable long time, but there could be constraints if there are foreign holdings and the like, because it also depends on the foreign regulators' inputs and the speed at which the foreign regulators work, right? I mean, SEBI, the intermediaries under which SEBI has control over, like Indian intermediaries, brokerage firms, etc., can give data quite fast, and SEBI can conclude investigations within 1 year in India. But if data points are required from abroad, that may be taking time.
Right. And the Supreme Court reserving its judgment, sir, whenever the judgment is finally passed, is that judgment going to be specifically on account of the Adani-Hindenburg Research report, or is it going to be on account of SEBI doing its investigation correctly or incorrectly, and hence some sort of action? What is the report, final report from the Supreme Court, the verdict from the Supreme Court likely to look like?
Yeah, I would think it will be more on the SEBI's investigation. There should be no credence, and Supreme Court has already sort of this one admonished the petitioner, saying that one should not rely on Hindenburg or OCCRP or whoever it is, right? These are third-party research agencies. I mean, the court cannot rely on some third-party research output, and those people have they are interested parties. In fact, Supreme Court admonished the petitioner themselves that their interest is quite, there is a conflict of interest, and that itself is telling. So Supreme Court should just rely on what is SEBI findings are, and rely on SEBI's findings, SEBI's inputs, and the like. And whatever order they come out with, I would think that they would again point out to SEBI itself and bring closure to the matter.